All right, if everybody could find their seats, we're allowed to start again. Kevin?
Oh, there he is.
Thank you. All right, welcome back. We're going to continue with item number 8. Oh, I'm sorry, before we do that, we're going to turn the time over to Kimber to introduce somebody new.
Yes, so Commissioners, I'm very excited to introduce you to Nora Shepard, our very attentive, not member of the public tonight. I know.
You look so attentive.
We are really, really excited to have Nora come on board. She is our new senior planner, joining the ranks of the city here. She has years of experience. She was actually one of my very first mentors when I started as a Planner 1 years ago. So she's fantastic and is joining our city to help us with all of our projects as we're growing and in our transition coming up. And welcome to Nora.
Our transition coming back. Welcome.
Welcome.
All right, thank you. And welcome. All right, item number 8. This is a public hearing, possible legislative and administrative recommendation for Village Plan 1 of Mount Saratoga, located approximately 1200 to 1900 West, between Pony Express Parkway and SR 73. Edge Homes is our applicant, and we'll turn the time over to Sarah Carroll for our presentation.
Okay, so the community plan was approved late last year, approved by the council in December, sorry, I don't know the exact date. Anyway, the end of last year, and then the applicant is coming forward with some proposed amendments to the community plan, and then the other items are on the agenda are their first 2 village plans. So what I did with the community plan is, what you're seeing here is all of the amendments, and then the original page, if a page had an amendment, the original page follows right behind it. To give a summary of the amendments, I'll just kind of go to the use map, and then I'll summarize those amendments, and then if we have specific questions, we can go through those. So this is the use map. The commercial area is the purple, that just the small areas over by Pony Express. So I'm going to use the mouse just to kind of get us all oriented. At least I think I am. Let's see. Okay, maybe not. Well, is everybody oriented where Pony Express is on the map? Okay, so the purple is, on the previous plan was, I can't remember what designation of commercial, either regional, I think it was regional commercial or neighborhood commercial. So community commercial wasn't adopted at the time, and now that it is, they're asking for those particular zones. And then the other areas that you see circled, so I'm going to move across the page from Pony Express to SR 73 and just summarize those circles that you're seeing there. So you're seeing a detention basin that wasn't shown on the previous plan, and that has changed some of the density numbers there. So the 2 yellow ones are Village 1, and some of the density numbers have changed, not a lot. You can see that summarized in the staff report. And then as we're moving to the left, the blue areas are Village 2 and 3, and so those numbers have changed slightly, and then Village 5, those numbers have changed as well. They're not huge changes. Some of the changes are related to phase boundaries, so between Village 2 and 5, they are adjusting the phasing boundary, which has resulted in a change to the unit counts. In Village 2, there's also a change because along Talus Ridge Boulevard, they did have some lots on the south side of the road that they no longer have there. Let's see. Let me see if I got everything. So their overall unit count is still 2,400. That was what their original approval was. They have consolidated some detention basins in Village 1 into a larger detention basin, and that's along Pony Express Parkway, next to the small purple area shown for community commercial. And then they've updated charts and tables related to that, and then added some clarification for parking requirements. Those weren't in there, however, what they added complies with our code. And then there's a summary of conditions in the staff report. So the community commercial locations that you're showing will not, there's concern that they're not going to comply with access standards, and we don't want to create lots or designations that don't comply with access standards, especially the small one. On an arterial, it's 500 feet, and on a collector, which would be Mount Saratoga Boulevard, running north to south through there, it's 330 feet, I believe. I know it's over 300 feet. So that little one on the corner wouldn't meet access requirements at all. The other one, the church site and the larger community commercial site, we're also concerned about access for those as well because of those same requirements. It's possible that they could have a road on the north side of that church and community commercial. However, we're also recommending that the community commercial be on the corner rather than have the church on the corner for access and visibility. And then there's existing accesses across the street, across Pony Express Parkway in Eagle Mountain that also need to be taken into consideration that could impact whether or not they can provide an access. So they might be able to get one off of Pony Express for that church and community commercial site, and that's still a might because of the location of the accesses across the street and up the street meaning to the west in Eagle Mountain. And then, let's see. And then there's a typo on page 8 related to some of the numbers in there. DRC, let's see, I covered that. So yeah, mainly access. I think if they were to make those adjustments that DRC would feel more comfortable with the proposed changes. And then the applicant, I'm not sure, they might have some additional comments as well. However, based on what you're seeing tonight, staff did recommend approval subject to those conditions in the staff report.
Okay, Sarah, as a matter of procedure, are you presenting for items 7, 8, and 9 at the same time? Now that we have
No,
different
I was just going to present them
motions.
one at a time.
Okay.
But I can do it however you choose.
Maybe we should look at all 3 of them, and then we can do the motions and we can get public comment for all 3 separately,
Sure.
together,
Yeah, we can do that. Amber, will you put up the next one? It's PDFs for, yeah. It should be open at the bottom, so item number 8. Okay, so Quail Hill at Mount Saratoga, do we need to announce that that we're hearing all 3 of those items together, I think?
So previously I made an error and I announced item number 8. What we were doing just now is reviewing item number 7. So as a
Okay.
matter of procedure, you can tell me how I need to do that.
Would you just announce that we're reviewing 7, 8, and 9 right
Yes.
now together?
We are reviewing 7, 8, and 9 together.
Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, so Quail Hill at Mount Saratoga is the first village plan. It's got frontage on Pony Express, and then it's got a good portion of Mount Saratoga Boulevard. It has single family ranging in sizes from, small lots to large lots, and then it also has a multifamily phase. And then it has the purple areas that you're seeing on this particular map are detention basins, and then the blue is the community commercial, and you've heard our recommendations on those regarding access. So here's an overview of what Village 1 looks like and the open space associated with that. As we go through each plat, however, open space phasing is a topic that needs to be discussed, and I can explain that a little bit more. And so what you're seeing in here, you're seeing the build-out allocation for those uses. Some of the comments in the staff report were that we need a few more items to comply with the requirements for a village plan, and I can go through those as well. Let me pull those up so that I'm mentioning those requirements while we're looking at it. And the items that need to be added or changed or addressed are also in the conditions. So there's a handful of conditions for this particular community plan, more than the next one. So they have development standards in here. The development standards for the single family, they match the community plan. However, we don't need to duplicate. So if a standard is already in the community plan, the problem with duplicating is if there's ever a need to amend it, then you have to amend both. So it's better just to have it in one place, and then also you're not having duplications that could potentially cause conflict if they're ever different. This is a lotting map, that outlines development standards as well. So their plans do include extensive trails and open space. The entire project has over 30% open space and 230 acres for the entire community plan. What you're seeing here are different sections of Village 1. So what I was mentioning is there's architectural standards for single family. Again, we don't need to duplicate what's in the community plan. So some of what you're seeing here is already there, and it's better to just refer to that and then only if there's additional guidelines to add those here. The standards you're seeing here for multifamily are very brief, and they're not actually an accurate depiction of the photo examples that are included. So we would like to see those expanded upon and also see photos that match those examples. So they're talking about arches, and the language regarding columns matches what you're seeing here, but this next photo here, obviously there's no arched entryways on either of those, and that's listed as a requirement. So obviously we don't want to have standards that already create a conflict with a proposed product. So we're asking them to add more standards for multifamily that address what they would actually like to develop. See. So the proposed density transfers that you're seeing in here outlined in the staff report, they are addressed in the community plan amendment proposal. We're asking them to reconfigure the community commercial, as I mentioned. They need to add some employment projections because that's required. That's a requirement for village plans. There's some errors in population projections. We don't need to duplicate standards that are already in the community plan. So open space and phasing. Let me get to that particular. So here's a phasing map, and one thing it's not indicating is what open space goes with what phase. And as this breaks down even further, so phase 1 that you're seeing here, for example, could be several plats, and it would be helpful to know how open space occurs, development and dedication of open space occurs with each particular plat. So what the applicant is proposing is that, go to the open space table. There's a lot of information on this table, but so Village 1, Quail Hill, it has a points requirement and a land dedication requirement. However, it still doesn't break Village 1 down into plats. And so once you take Village 1 Phase 1 and you break that down into plats, you could see easily that if you had, a phase close to Mount Saratoga Boulevard, that phase is not going to be next to open space. So we would like more information on how that's going to occur. And the applicant did put information in here to address it. it still leaves questions, however, it just still leaves questions of, if your open space is not next to your plat, how is it developed, how is it accessed? A lot of areas within this development are native areas, so the applicant's proposing that they dedicate those native areas, and that if that particular area doesn't have amenities in it, that they dedicate extra open space up to a value of 40 points, so that they can't meet that, they have a limit on how much open space can be used to meet the points requirement, and that would be 50% open space, or 50% of the points let's see, so you have the land acreage that's required, and then you have amenities that's required, and if that particular phase of open space doesn't have amenities, they're proposing that additional open space be dedicated with that phase up to 50% of the points requirement. And that could be useful in the long term. It does leave other phases with less land dedication required, but more amenities points required. And the applicant can discuss that further if there's questions on that particular proposal. Let's see, we do need floor area ratio information for commercial, which shouldn't be difficult to provide because that's not a lot of commercial. And then, and then the signage also duplicates what's in the community plan. So the village plan is really meant to add additional criteria and information rather than duplicate. And we also need cost estimates for utilities because that's a requirement as well. Okay, so that's Village 1. Let me finish scrolling through. They have landscape plans as required and legends for those and quantities for those. They actually don't have required quantities for those, but they have legends that list quantities. So it could be interpreted that we're holding them to those quantities. We have trail details. And then I believe these are also in the community plan. And then the village and pedestrian plan. So there's trails, all the red lines that you're seeing here are trails. So on both sides of Mount Saratoga Boulevard and then along the native area open spaces and manicured areas. And these are the density transfers. However, this has already been addressed in the community plan amendment, so we don't necessarily need this particular page. And then all of this signage is in the community plan. So as I mentioned, we only need it if it's in addition to, so they could delete those pages. And then the findings statement is provided as required. Okay, so we can go to the next one. Kimber, will you pull up number 9? Oh, is 9 not down there? In the presentation folder. Okay, so 2A is half of what you saw on the community plan for Village 2. So 2A is about half of it, and it includes single-family lots and open space and storm drain. It includes an extension to Talus Ridge Boulevard and another extension into a local street in the Talus Ridge developments to meet the connection requirements. We have fewer comments on this one, I think, because it's less complex than Village Plan 1, fewer units and things like that. So from the comments in here, let's see. So the proposed phasing amendments and unit count amendments are subject to approval of the proposed community plan. We don't need to duplicate the parking information. Some of the maps need to be relabeled. It's a requirement that that lotting plans be included, and those are included, but they're labeled as development standards, so we're just asking that they label it as both. And then we need estimates for off-site utility costs as required by the code. So if I run through here, they have their summary and their unit counts, and so here you can see the boundary for Village 2A, and then the use map and the build-out allocations, and the lotting maps and development standards, and then the design guidelines. And I believe these duplicate the community plans, so they're not necessary unless they're in addition, which my review indicated it was a duplication. And then, so design guidelines, there will be a homeowners association, and then the phasing plan is described here. We have the same comment with open space and phasing and plating that we do with Village Plan 1, that you know, there's a guideline for how open space occurs with each plat, but it still could potentially have some concerns about the open space not necessarily having access with that particular phase, and then we get ahead on land and behind on amenities. Okay.
Is that it?
That's it for me.
Okay.
Oh,
Thank you,
we have
Sarah.
one more.
Is the applicant here?
Oh, I presented all three.
Arthur.
Is the applicant here? Would you like to come join us up here at the?
It's the hot seat right here.
That is.
And could you, for us, give your name and address for the record?
Yeah, so Brandon Watson with Edge Homes, 482 West, 800 North in Orem, Utah.
Brandon, did you want to add anything to the presentation?
So I think Sarah did a great job. I know we've been working with her, and we've been exchanging a lot of emails, phone calls, meetings, et cetera. And she's put a lot of effort into this, and I really appreciate all that she's done on this. So, I mean, I guess I could address any comments that you guys might have on any of the three. I know there's a lot of information covered on this, so I guess I'll be here to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
So this is a public hearing. I think we're going to open up the public hearing for all three items, 7, 8, and 9 at the same time. So if anybody has any comments on 7, 8, or 9, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Okay. We'll close public comment at this time, given there aren't any. And we'll open it up to the Planning Commission.
And my comments are more toward the city than you.
Sure.
I don't have any major problems with what you're showing here. But I had a question on the city, to the city, on, well, you know, of course it will deal with 7 also, but item 8 with the Quail Hill area, that's where they're putting in the ballpark. And I was told that the points for a ballpark are higher now, and it's still listed as 4.4, which I think we ought to give them the extra points, even though they started this before we changed that. And that will change quite a lot as far as the points that they will receive for the amenities that they have in that development.
So just a quick clarification, when they adopted the community plan, they had their own, not their own, they adopted that section of code as it was at the time. So as we've amended it, their code hasn't amended. So it would be an amendment to their community plan, but we'll certainly work through that with them.
Okay. It would benefit them, I would think.
Yeah. I think when that points code came out, it was just fresh. Yeah, fresh off the press there, so.
So
Thank you.
do remember that adoption of that agreement was a legislative decision. The council made that decision at the time. They certainly could choose to add those additional points, but there were other concessions that the city made, one of those being they were going to accept maintenance of those open space areas. which is not typical with other developments. So basically, the developer had to build the parks and open space to this level. In return, the city agreed to maintain those. So just keep that in mind, that is a
Okay, and
legislative decision.
my main concern is not necessarily with this development. So if they want to keep it at the 4.4 is fine, but I just want to make sure that we classify a ball diamond higher than a horseshoe pit.
We'll have the horseshoers here next time.
We thought we had the first pickleball court in the city, but you guys beat us to it, so.
So whatever they determine on that. That's the only comment that I have.
Commissioner Steele is on the edge of her seat over there.
Well, no, but you know I'm going to have a comment. I'll start with the community plan. On page 11, there's a park shown. And is that going to be a park that the city maintains? Yes. Oh. And I didn't bring the book. It shows parking places, and I somehow didn't pick up the community plan. Well, can I make it simpler then? For any park that the city maintains that is a city park, or anything that's designated as city rather than just for the development, if you provide parking, you're going to need to provide disabled parking and at least one van space. Yeah, thank you.
Page 24.
Yes. Anyway, I'll just make it that simple. If the city, if it's going to be a park that's used by all of the citizens of the city and it's not just for the development, and I know there's some that,
This one will be public.
okay, then the parking area needs to have at least one van space. And then I've got a question on procedure here. I can find nothing in the community plan or any of the village plans that addresses that the corner lots should be 10% larger than the smallest allowed. And since we're amending and cleaning up, would it be better that can we make an amendment to their community plan, or do we just need to add it to the village plan each time?
Yep, we can add that to the community.
To the community plan? Okay, that would be cleaner. Okay.
So would your intent, Commissioner Steele, be to amend that in to the community plan amendments tonight?
So noted.
Okay. Then I have a comment on the Saratoga Village 1, and that at Quail Hill. This is something that the building department will not check for, but I feel an obligation to let you know that you probably need to look at the Fair Housing Act design manual, and you can get it online, because I believe some of your where you have stacked units, your bottom floor will probably need to adhere to that.
Sure.
And just a heads up.
Yeah, so So the stack flat condos is a product new to us. We've done it in probably 2 or 3 other communities. And we've actually made adjustments to several of the buildings that have ADA accessibility in them to make sure they've got a van accessible parking garage that's on them. And then we also provide all of our ADA routes throughout the community to make sure that we've got access to each one of those.
I'm talking about the unit itself.
Right, yeah,
You just take a look at it and see what you think.
will do, yeah.
Okay, and same story, so 18th verse. They've got a lot of locust trees along public streets, and we can only suggest, but there are probably some trees that are better suited to be street trees.
Sure.
My experience with locust trees are that they have roots that go and come up.
Out, sure,
They're fine in parks, by the way.
yeah.
They provide great shade, and they're a good tree for a park. Item 9, the ridge. There's some double frontage lots, such as shown on LP 21, is there such a thing? Or did I look at a plat map? Okay, there's some double frontage lots that are along there and on the other side. Where the road is,
Darker Road, Talus Boulevard, yeah, there you go.
but tell us, and then there's another one. Yes, those and any, and I guess this is going to be a question for any double frontage lots. How are you going to manage, who's going to maintain park strips along public streets where there is double frontage?
Right. So I believe in our community plan we got approved in September, we committed that along Talus Boulevard, which is this road you see here, as well as Mount Saratoga Boulevard, which is the main road cutting north to south through the subdivision. Our master association would maintain the park strips along all of those. Although it's a publicly dedicated road to the city, our association would maintain the park strips.
And where are you going to have them put their fences?
So the fencing along those would go on the back of the sidewalk, yeah.
Okay, that's a good answer. And I've got one more.
Was that specific to Village Plan 2, Commissioner Steele?
Oh, that's where I noticed it.
Okay.
I know we had committed to that everywhere we had double-fronted lots.
They'll,
Okay.
they'll have that situation along Talus Ridge Boulevard because it's like driveways on there, and then along Mount Saratoga Boulevard. Well, because,
Will we need to add that as a condition in both Village 1 and Village 2?
well, it's already in our code, and in the community plan, it states that that those park strips will be maintained.
Okay.
Okay, and one more. On your vehicular and pedestrian plan, and that is page 38 of Village 1, Quail Hill. And since I am not up on the side of the hill walking it, I noticed that you have no sidewalks on Quail Hill Road, nor do you have any on Lehigh Fairfield Road. And there are going to be driveways coming out, but are there going to be any sidewalks?
Yeah, so that's your standard local road. We just didn't show those in there. So the red dashed lines that you see on here, which are either trails that are native trails going through open space or sidewalk along Mount Saratoga Boulevard, those are just to indicate that those are actual amenity trails. So Mount Saratoga Boulevard, the sidewalk, we've actually widened from your standard cross-section for a collector road. We've widened that, so it's an actual trail all along there, as well as all of those that go through kind of those lighter green areas that are red dashed in there. Those are native trails to kind of get up into the open space that's...
And so you will be putting sidewalks on both sides of the street?
Yeah, they'll meet your standard local road cross-sections.
I think that's all.
Okay.
Sarah, could we get an overlay of what this is going to look like? Oh, put this on the city map overlay? Because I wanted to see what it looks like for Pony Express. How it kind of lines up with, uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Choose with the
Oh, yes. So I was curious to see more towards Pony Express Parkway area. Will it move that way? So my question is, they're going to be widening, I guess MAG, we got funding from MAG to widen that area. Do we know where lights are going to go along there, or how will this development change that? Do we know?
I don't know the answer, but I do know that the applicant has been
Okay.
on that with MAG and the widening and our cross-section, mountains cross-section, that final will be. So we feedback to the applicant early.
Okay. And then the last thing is street names. Is there confusion between the two where they meet up? Is that confusing for residents or future residents? Because doesn't the name change? It's like on our side, it's...
Not here, that's SR 73 that you're thinking of. So SR 73 has,
Well, but where Mount Saratoga Road is, isn't it, it meets up with one in Eagle Mountain that's called something different, right?
yes, that's right, it does change there.
We'd rather not adopt their name.
Well, yeah, it's advertising their development, yeah, but anyway, I was just curious, okay.
We do sometimes see in street name changes over where it's separated by a large, from the city's perspective and the way we need.
And then the small bit of community commercial on the, we're not going to lose that, are we? I mean, is there something, I don't want to lose any commercial if we can avoid it.
It's a good question. We'll have to see what the applicant proposes. Brandon, do you have a comment on how that?
Sure. So obviously, Edge Homes isn't commercial developers, right? So we understand that commercial is desired in this area. I think it's an appropriate fit to have it along Pony Express. Absolutely. So from a spacing and an access standpoint, I guess I'll address the larger community commercial piece, which on this map shows it as 6.8 acres. When we came through with our original community plan, the community commercial zone wasn't available. So I think, like Sarah had said, it was available for regional, or it was designated as regional commercial. Obviously, we'd like to, I think that's an appropriate zone to have it be community commercial. So from an access standpoint, I guess we've got two options. You've got Mount Saratoga Boulevard as it intersects with Silver Lake to the south. And I believe the spacing was 500 feet to get an access off of Pony Express, which is ironically about halfway between that community commercial zone. So I think we can get an access in off of there. If we have to bring in, sorry.
Challenge is then you're too close to that access coming out of that.
Yeah. So I don't know if the 3 hour, I don't know if the 3 hours a week that comes out of the church is going to take precedence over a commercial zone, but anyway, that's up to engineering and us to decide if that's appropriate or not, so.
One thing I've noticed on churches that buffer up against big arteries is a lot of times they'll put gates or fences on their access to the, I would drive by them and go, why are they doing that? It looks so awful. It'd be nice if they could move the church somewhere so that they don't have to do that.
So we've reached out to the church to see kind of what their interest is. We haven't heard anything back from them, so I realize we're reserving a spot for them to come in and put a church in there, but they have not told us yes or no. So I guess if they don't like that coming off of an arterial, then that was more commercial, which is great.
Okay, that's all I have, thanks.
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole piece could be.
Okay, other comments from the planning commission?
So I have some.
When you give the comments, can you refer to the community plan or the Village 1 or Village 2?
Yes, I can. So this is the community plan. The note here about water quality devices are undersized. So is this something that the applicant builds additional treatment capacity, or how does builds that?
Okay, so I think you're referring to.
Yes, it's in the engineering report, sorry. So I think it's still
So
part of the community.
what was brought up is the existing treatment device that was in the bottom of House Ridge Drive. It works well currently. As the new flows from the storm drain systems upstream of that size, we require a 5-year storm sign in the standards. And so the designer will have to they'll have to come up with.
So that's up to the applicant then? So what do you plan to do then? I mean,
Yeah, I know when we originally put that oil water separator in, when we did Taos Ridge Boulevard, at the time it was sized appropriately to handle what's coming off of Mount Saratoga Boulevard. We understand changes have happened in code as far as storm drain requirements, so that now that system is antiquated. I don't know what that means citywide, if that applies everywhere else, but you know, if we have to throw in an oil water separator up on our side of Mount Saratoga, so be it.
so that's something the applicant's willing to look at and do?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
So reading, again, it's still in the community plan, I think. Does the city have the water to service Village 1? Because I think there was a question about that in the plan.
There's a whole bunch of master planning that's going into all of the water stuff. And so Dan and the engineering department and our consulting engineers have been scouring that. I've actually spent too much time looking at it as well. They do have a plan. It will work. Basically, they're going to be building Zone 3 initially, and then they're going to be servicing this first area using the Zone 3 tank. And then as they build around the side of the mountain, they'll complete the Zone 2 infrastructure, which will ultimately then just get crossed over. So there's a good plan for building it, and we've had it approved through our engineering department, and the backbone infrastructure is really kind of the big deal stuff that they're working on. So I can tell you it's there, and we have the master plan that's required from the.
Okay. Yeah, because reading this, it has a lot of numbers. It says, you know, how much it's needed, but it seemed like it was a moving target as far as what is being developed where, and there's the zones and the village and the plans don't necessarily overlap. I mean, so that, I just want to ask to make sure, it doesn't say here that that the city actually has the water, it just says that it's planning to build it in different timeframes. So,
Yeah, and
just
that's
wanted to be
part
sure.
of the special assessment area that we did over this entire property, is to create capital to help build all this infrastructure. And so it is conflicting. If you pulled all those plans together, kind of pre us finishing the master plans here recently, you would notice discrepancies, but we've come to kind of a conclusion on all of that. And Dan, you're welcome to jump in.
I think you said it well. We've been working through a lot of utility master plans with Brandon.
Yeah.
And it's right there, well, very close to being accepted. That plan, as Mark talked about, they're building the Zone 3. After that is the other zones. Not be needed to serve for irrigation, but it is a working as plats come forward. Built out, there is
There's a method to our madness.
Well, and along, so just a few pages after that is the secondary water plan, also still in the community plan, but is it typical that irrigation or secondary water requirements are double culinary water requirements? Because it says here the culinary water requirements is about 1 million, whatever it is, gallons or whatever, whereas the secondary water, it says it's 1.96, so about almost 2 million. And then if it is double, and it says that for a while culinary water will have to be used for irrigation and such, it doesn't say how long, then, well, actually, do we know how long it's going to have to be used that way? And then that means that we'll have to have 3 times the culinary water requirements in order to fill the double secondary water. So I'm just wondering if that's been looked at, because again, it doesn't say so here. It says this is what we need, but not this is what we have.
so yeah, there's the requirement for the secondary water is high because there's a lot of space. Discussing the tank that they're building is serving both drinking water and secondary water needs for a while. As secondary water ponds, that transfers, that we gain, that tank that's been built now can serve. But yeah, I haven't, Sultan has reviewed all these numbers and passing them on, and been a working document. It's very close right now.
And still in the community plan, is the transportation section based on the city's latest transportation plan?
You're talking about your master plan?
Again, on the community plan.
I believe it is. So Mount Saratoga Boulevard shows as a collector road on your master transportation plan, which we show it actually a little wider because of that trail system that we're adding to it. And then Talus Ridge Boulevard also is on your master transportation plan as a collector road, and we're showing that meeting that standard, so yes.
There was a title, about a title exception. So, yeah, what do we, if I say title exception, do you know what I'm talking about? Sarah? It's on page 41 of the community plan. It says, all right, I write these down, but I don't always mark them. It's right at, it's the next page after that. But if I can't find it, we'll just move on. There's something about, there is a title exception, so should we look for it in a future, should we look at it in a future revision? About, you know, if I can't find it, forget it. Just go on. There are some historical sites, I guess, identified, and I was wondering what the applicant plans to do with it. I think it said that you're coordinating with some folks. Is there something that you're doing with it, or does the city have an interest in its disposition for the historical artifacts?
Yeah. Yeah, so I know we've been in
Petroglyphs.
contact with, I forget the name of the local community, and they've reached out to us several times about how to preserve these. So we're trying to figure out, one, the best way to preserve them, whether that's keep them there on site and create some sort of a preservation area that people can come over there and take a look at them, but at the same time protecting them so that they don't become vandalized at the same time. So we're working with them, trying to figure out what the best solution is.
Does the city have any interest in that, or, I mean, I don't think I think there was some stuff in the code talking about it, but I don't know what it means as far as if we have an interest in it.
Well, so our code, we don't have a historic preservation program. It's just something that is to be brought up in a community plan as an element. And if it's determined through that process that it's something that the Planning Commission, the council, the citizens, the applicant, anyone has an interest in, then it gets taken care of in the community plan. And so early on in the process, there were some nearby residents that had identified some petroglyphs, and this element was put in that, and the developers expressed interest in protecting some of the more crucial sites. And so that became part of the community plan, but it's not codified in our code. We don't have a program, and it's really up to these bodies working together as to what we want to do.
Okay, I mean, I figure, depending on where it is, it could be a real pain for you, because it could be right in the middle of a housing development, but I also think it's an asset. It's kind of it makes, I mean, it contributes to the character, and the unique character of the
History of
place,
the area, yeah. It's just hard to kind of juggle also, do we keep them there on site? How do we protect them 24/7 to make sure nothing gets vandalized, et cetera? So we're still trying to figure out the details of all that.
Okay. Page 53 of the community plan. I think this is just a correction, I think. So there's some red text talking about parking requirements. And it says all single-family housing, although this section is for 2- and 3-family residential. So I was just wondering, is that just a typo?
I think it's,
well, not multifamily. The multifamily, I think, is correct. It's the 2- and 3-family. Well, I guess that's multifamily, but, right?
Yeah, it needs to stay.
It needs to be changed for the 2- and 3-family, yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to the Village Plan 1. There's a comment that says that more multifamily and commercial architectural restrictions and requirements details are needed. So will the applicant be able to provide those?
yeah, absolutely. So in fact, tonight I've got some plans that are actual photos of our townhomes and the condominiums that we plan on putting in Village 1. Specifically, we've got our model homes, exterior, interior pictures. I can provide those if you'd like, but we intend to have basically the design guidelines centered around what we're actually building, so hopefully there shouldn't be any confusion.
This application is both administrative and legislative, so I'm going through some really boring stuff, but I just want to make sure that we take care of the administrative side. So.
Sure.
And then I had a bunch of stuff, or several about off-site utility costs and water quality device, employment projections, but I think Sarah covered all those, and that's that's in the conditions, so I'll skip that. Now I'll go to Village 2A. Oh, yeah, there's a picture. Let's find a page. Page 3 of Village Plan 2A. That picture of the village. So in the red border, yeah. So in the red border area, it says Village 2, and then right under it, it also says Village 2.
It should be 2.
Okay. So we're going to see Village 2 later on, is that?
So this, what we're seeing
Oh,
right now
2B,
is
2B.
A, and we'll see.
Or not to be. Courtesy of Commissioner Wilkins. Okay. So it's just a typo then.
They
Yeah,
should add 2A to that.
okay. So I think this might be my last. Yeah, this is my last one. So this is just a general question. So the phasing plan for, at least for Village 2A, talks about the open space calculation and shows a deficiency of 19.4 amenity points. And then the idea was for 0.5 acres will be dedicated to make up the deficiency. So I was just wondering, where do those acres come from, the 0.5? Where do you pull it from?
They're already in here, and so what they'll do is they'll dedicate future phases, the land will have already been dedicated.
Okay, so if you're dedicating more land to open space, that reduces what's going to be built?
No, so they're dedicating more with that phase, but not more overall. So the overall will stay the same. So with the phase, they'll get ahead on open space, and then the next phase, they'll already have dedicated the land.
Oh, okay. Okay, I understand that now. All right, thank you.
Okay, I have a question. In your presentation, Sarah, you mentioned a few items. You said there were still unresolved issues with regards to open space, phasing, amenities, floor area ratio, commercial areas, signage, remove duplications, and cost estimates. Just wondering, for our decision tonight, those things need to be resolved previous to this decision, or?
It's whatever you're comfortable with. It's fine. They can be addressed as conditions.
Okay, do you suggest that we add those as conditions, that they
They're
be
included.
resolved? Or are they already in the conditions and the engineers? Okay, if they're already in there, then,
So if the phasing of open space, that's only if you have any concerns with the way it's proposed. It doesn't have to be changed, added. So it can be left the way that it is. I brought it up just for discussion purposes. So there's no condition related to that, but all the other items I talked about, there's conditions.
is there any feeling of creating a condition for open space requirements?
I think open space is really important. Should, just to get it in there.
Yes.
I understand it's not necessarily about how much or whatever with the open space, it's more about the phasing, like what open space goes with which phase and whatnot. Which, in listening to the thing, it sounds like we kind of got that figured out, or at least they've got a good idea on that. So I don't know what we would really condition there.
All right, let's talk about the potential conditions that we discussed tonight for the community plan. The first one was a disabled and van space. Sure.
I just need a minute to interrupt. The applicant has the revised submittal today, and I don't know how much is changing. Numbers are changing or that. If it is, you'll need to see it anyhow. So I just want to ask the applicant if those changes are
Well, yeah, so like I said, we've got got comments back, we've addressed them all. We've got a phasing plan for open space. Obviously, it's a timing issue. We're spending about $9 million in upfront infrastructure costs just to be able to break ground on the first house. So we're extremely front-loaded as far as infrastructure goes between water tanks, storm drain, off-site sewer, et cetera. And so, and I know originally we were trying to also consolidate our open space, put it somewhere that makes sense instead of little pocket parks here and there, which sure can be great, but I also think consolidation of open space is extremely important as well. So that large park that we have kind of up towards the top of the hill, I think that's fantastic. I'd hate to break that up and have that into a bunch of smaller parks just to be able to meet the 30% running open space. So we're okay to dedicate the ground, that's not a problem at all. It's just simply getting to that open space is going to take, like I said, we're about $9 million in infrastructure just to be able to get off the ground here, so.
So what's the general feeling? I mean, we have three different proposals before us, Community Plan, Village 1, and Village 2. Are we ready to move on?
Sarah, were you satisfied with because you addressed kind of the phasing of the open space, but it sounded like your question was more to a bunch of other stuff within the plan, and were the changes he was going to be making impact that? Did that satisfy that?
What we're seeing is, so the applicant has already submitted some plats for review, and what we're seeing with those plats is the open space, and you can, or even that one's fine. So on this map right here, so, you know, the applicant has submitted some phases, and say there's like 15 lots or 30 lots in one phase, the open space isn't adjacent to that, which I don't know that there's a good way to address it, and so, and then the amenities aren't adjacent to that, or they'll come, you can see as they build this, you can see that the last phase is going to be the manicured park, which is going to have the, you know, significant amenities, but that's at the end of the road. And so they're going to get ahead on land dedication before the amenities get put in. I don't know that with this particular project, with a smaller project, we address it, you know, it's easier to address. With this scale of a project, I don't know that there's, I don't actually have a recommendation on how to address it. What they're proposing is that, you know, the open space won't be right next to the first plat or the second plat or whatever, but they'll still dedicate that area and improve, you know, for example, a section of trail or things like that. So, for example, if their first plat is, you know, a portion of this, so say just some lots in here, well, the open space that's going to be dedicated is over here, and then there's a small section of trail, but it would just be this little section of open space. So, the plan doesn't necessarily address, and Brandon just mentioned in their resubmittal, they'll be addressing that, you know, the next dedication has to be contiguous or something like that, or have a certain amount of.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so then I guess, say the next plat is here, then they're proposing that the next dedication of open space.
Sarah, did you say the applicant submitted new information today?
But I haven't had a chance to take a close look at that.
So is that information subject to public notice and public hearing?
Well, that's why we're not presenting it, because, you know, it's a timing issue. The public wouldn't have any chance. We're not presenting new information. That's in your packet.
But we're making a legislative and administrative recommendation based on information we have now, but further information has been provided that we haven't even reviewed.
And that's why I ask them if it's substantial, because if it's changing what you're reviewing today, you know, densities or a layout, or that, you know, the village plan requirements, like, so some design guidelines, because there's a condition in there that they need to add more, that could just be a condition and could be passed on. So I don't know how significant those changes are, which is why I asked the applicant, because it could be that we table this and you get that for your next meeting.
Well, in light of the city not being so confident in the information, how this changes, I don't know how confident we can be.
That was the feeling I had at the beginning of the meeting with the many items that I had listed, and I had asked Sarah Carroll about.
Well, can we do have?
Kimber?
The applicant kind of shook his head like, no, it wasn't substantial, so.
Yeah.
Can we get an explanation
So-
as to what is in those additional changes?
Sure, so obviously we received red lines back. We've got conditions that are presented here tonight. I guess the packet that I have simply just addresses those conditions. It's not like we're moving lots around, we're not decreasing, increasing open space, we're not, what you see is what we're presenting. It's simply, oh, okay, we need to add in some more phasing on how open space will be handled. So we added in, for example, an extra sheet that shows that. Like I said, we're not transferring densities, we're not trying to slip anything by there. It's just simply addressing the conditions that are in your packet tonight.
So
Kimber?
all of the feedback that they're responding to and that were conditions in your reports and in the presentation, all of that feedback has been given to the applicants, and so their submittal today was in response to those. We just haven't had a chance to look at it because it came in today. What you can do if you choose to forward a recommendation on this is if everything they submitted today is in response to things you're already putting in as conditions, then it would be no different than if they submitted next week prior to the council meeting. So it really depends on your level of comfort with that. It's just, we wanted to ask the applicant if there were more substantial changes. If it's just a resubmittal addressing these red lines, we're good to go. If it's more substantial, then you'd have to see it again anyway. So we wanted to give them the chance to answer that question.
So just for my clarity, so the difference would be in 2 weeks there may be just less conditions on the recommendation.
Is that what you think, Mr. Watson?
Yeah.
I would think that it would be a cleaner recommendation if we do table it, continue it. Because I'm always concerned when we have a lot of conditions. We need to see them.
Can we review the conditions?
Yeah, I didn't feel that we had a lot of conditions. I felt, that, and again, as the staff has said, that if there is something for us to review, we will review it. But, yeah, but if it's just addressing I think for the 100 or so pages that we read, the number of conditions were actually very few.
And one question for the applicant, is there a timeline or anything here that you're trying to meet?
Yeah, absolutely. So, trying to think how to explain it. So, yeah, basically we've had to have a lot of infrastructure built by October 31st of this year. We've got certain funding that's available to us by then. I know Mark's not here, but he's very heavily involved in it. I know we've been talking with engineering and planning about our timeline for all of this. And like Sarah had mentioned, we've got final plats that are just kind of waiting for this to be approved so that they can get pushed through and get approved so we can start construction on this. And it's, like I said, it's about $9 million worth of funding that we've got to get this stuff underway and built by October 31st of this year. So a delay of 2 weeks could push us a month just because of the city council meetings that aren't there in June and in July.
So let me ask this question. Does this body have the ability to act in a way that will place conditions, that will direct and guide this in the way that we want it to go? So in a way that we can feel comfortable and we can move on?
What concerns do we have at this point, other than the fact that there's a second submittal addressing conditions that we haven't seen? Are there any other concerns we have?
Let me address the additional conditions that people spoke about. Commissioner Steele on the community plan talked about disabled and one van space. We had corner lots to become, sorry?
Yes, it's the public.
Right. Then there were corner lots that need to be 10% larger. We can add that as a condition.
And how do we do that? The smallest lot or the smallest allowed lot?
Or would you do that in the community plan and it covers both village plans?
And is that something that was, I mean, are we making a substantial change to their community plan in doing this?
We would
Okay.
require it everywhere in the city.
Well, that's true, but this is a community plan in which they've built this based upon that not being in there. I can see now where we're adding 10% to the size of every corner lot. That could be a significant change for them that they weren't planning on.
Well, that is
And
basically.
I think we're
city
planning on, there
code.
might be maybe a lot or two that doesn't have it. I know that's exactly what your code is right now, which
And it's 10%
we're not trying
larger
to
than the
change
small.
that. We're
So
okay
it
with
doesn't sound
that.
like you're too concerned about it. If you're not concerned about it, I'm not concerned about it.
All right, let me finish with the other potential conditions. In Village Plan 1, needed to look at fair housing design manual to make sure that it was compliant with ADA, parking
No,
garage.
not ADA, not ADA.
Recommendation, okay?
It's not ADA, it's fair housing.
Got it.
Big difference.
Did hear the word ADA, though.
On that particular one, we don't.
Right. Okay, Village Plan 2, double frontage lots, but I think that was already addressed within the community plan. That's not necessary. So really, that's it.
Well, and there's a
Not
concern about,
ADA, disabled.
there is a concern about the open space. I'm not sure what we can do about it, though.
Well, it was open space phasing.
That's going to be one of those things
Right.
we have to kind of figure out as we go, where as they bring in a plat, if it's deficient, they'll have to find off-site. So it's going to be something we have to kind of work. Our code won't, we don't allow applications to get behind on open space. They can get ahead. And then if they bring in a phase or two without open space, they can draw down from being ahead. But I don't think it's really something.
Okay.
It's really the phasing that is the question,
Yeah.
because the plan overall, if they built it all in one day, which they're not going to do, they'd be okay.
Okay.
That'd be great, right?
Okay. I think that's it.
Two, I think
I
it's
took
just
notes.
one, right?
And it went down to one. No, it wasn't
Oh,
ADA, it was disabled. Right?
It's the same.
They're one and the same on that.
Got it.
No, handicap is not PC. You
Have we
can-
discussed this sufficiently? I will entertain a motion.
I move, once
Wait,
we get
we
the,
have three motions, so we have
Three
community
motions,
plan,
yeah, so-
Village Plan 1, Village Plan 2.
So this one is for the community plan amendments, and added to are just on the next page.
okay, and those are,
Got it, though.
okay, so those two conditions are community plan, and the other two are just standard, okay. Based upon the information discussion tonight, I move that we forward a positive recommendation for the community plan amendments for Mount Saratoga with the findings and conditions in the staff report with two additions. One, that corner lots be 10% larger than the smallest allowed lot. And two, that all public parks be ADA compatible with parking.
Compatible or compliant?
Compliant? Is that sufficient, Sandra? You know this better. Compliant, ADA compliant with in regards to parking.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Do we have a question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Community plan passes unanimously. I'll entertain a motion for Village Plan number 1.
Based upon, oh yeah, for sure. Based upon the information discussion tonight, I move that we forward a recommendation for approval to the City Council for the Mount Saratoga Village Plan 1, Quail Hill at Mount Saratoga with the findings and conditions in the staff report.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I will entertain a motion for Village Plan number 2.
Based upon the information discussion tonight, I move to forward a recommendation for approval to the City Council for Mount Saratoga Village Plan 2A, the Ridge at Mount Saratoga, with the findings and conditions in the staff report.
We have a motion.
Second.
And we have a second. Do we have a question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Brandon. Work session. Let's move on to item number 10. This is a work session, code amendments, multiple sections, city initiated. Kimber.
Hi, okay, so another one of those items that I would like to wrap up is another round of code amendments, just to clean things up. As you recall, we've had code amendments about every quarter for the last couple of years, closing loopholes, cleaning up programs, bringing things into compliance with state law, federal law, et cetera. Our last amendment was a huge overhaul, which was fantastic. Things are working really well. But of course, there are unintended consequences, and as we were reorganizing everything, moving all those design standards around, a couple things got dropped, and then there were some other items that were already building up on the list of amendments that were headed our direction. So with that, I just wanted to run through these changes. I have the draft up if you want to look at the actual language, but want to get your input on some of these. There are a couple others. Speaking of handicapped versus disabled versus ADA, our code actually does have a couple sections that say handicapped, so you're going to see me add that in as we fix it and remove a couple of words there. Also, based on what happened, here's one example tonight where we're getting plans from applicants the day of a meeting. We've had that happen a lot lately and have just started saying, like we did tonight, sorry, we're not going to present brand new information to the Planning Commission in 3 hours that we haven't had a chance to look at. It's been suggested by actually Sandra a couple times, and it's been on our list, but we all think it's a great idea having a timeline, a deadline. If you don't get your plans to staff a week before the meeting or longer, our draft reports are due 2 weeks ahead of the meeting. Our packet goes out a week ahead. And so if we don't have that information in time to make it into the packet with a staff review, we're just not going to have it on. And so we're going to throw something else that's not in your draft tonight, but we're going to put some deadlines in the code so that none of us are having to deal with last-minute changes.
Thank you. That's how we do it at work. It's very professional.
It's great. If you're not on the agenda, you're not on the
Need
agenda.
to see it to review it, so it's good.
Yeah.
What is the requirement for public notice? How many
For public
days?
notice, so we actually notice early. For public hearings, it's 10 days. We actually try to get it out a little early just in case there's a buffer. We aim for 2 full weeks, and then if there is some urgency after that 14-day deadline, sometimes we'll put something on, but it's 10 days. You're actually only required to have your packets, I believe, 24 hours prior to the meeting statutorily. But we have internally committed to giving it to you a week ahead of time. Can you imagine 24 hours,
No.
300 pages? Yeah.
No,
No.
we don't want to imagine that.
So, it used to be that you got it 3 days ahead of time. Then, just shortly after I came on, we had some discussions with the commission and the council, and we've moved it back to a very strict as possible week. Sometimes it ends up being 6 days where, we're waiting for a consultant report or whatever, but we try to give you as much lead time as possible. And bringing things to you the day of the meeting is not fair to you, to the applicant, or to staff. So with that, this looks like a big packet, but most of it is fairly minor. We want to, something we identified in the last cleanup was we have a lot of definitions for refueling stations, and they kind of overlap, so tighten those up a little bit. Bed and breakfast, convenience stores, update some of our definitions. Some of them are a little antiquated. Remember with the deli definition, when we were looking at ABC Great Beginnings, how deli says you can only sell meats and breads. Well, and cheese, that's right. So there are other things like a bagel shop, which has the same impact as a deli, right? So we wanted to broaden that just a little bit. In 1904, that was the chapter that got kind of the biggest overhaul as we tried to streamline and rename things and remove redundancies. We didn't have an arterial setback in there before, but as we've looked at some projects, we'd really like to have a bit of extra space along an arterial so that you don't have homes right along the edge of the road. And then some of these other ones were things that kind of got missed. So for example, we used to have a requirement that open space has a frontage requirement. That wasn't intended to come out, it accidentally came out, so we're sticking it back in. And then footprint development was a little confusing as to how the math worked. So a footprint development where you just own the footprint of the house or the townhome. We had some language in there, and it was a holdover from a long time ago where it said, the minimum unit size shall be based upon the size of the house, or the building. Basically what it meant to say was there is no minimum lot size because the lot size is the size of the house. we have a minimum house size, so let's just leave it at that and not have some confusing language in there. And then, obviously, as we change all these definitions in 1902, we need to change the table. And then this one here, clarifying that non-residential development is also subject to trail and amenity requirements. So if you have a commercial development come in, we haven't really had issues so far, but some developers have questioned, saying, well, we don't want to provide that part of the trail. And so you have, sidewalk and trail coming up, and then a commercial development that doesn't want to put it in, and a gap, and then the trail on the other side. So just fixing that little hole there.
What amenity requirements would you think?
So amenity, that's more like, if you happen to be along the mixed waterfront area and you're supposed to provide more of a gathering area, having that. It's not the points requirement for open space. We're not going to make them put in benches and things like that if they don't want to. But, if it's something that's called out as an improvement, whether it's a bicycle parking, which we didn't, when we have the trail and parks master plan, if they fall subject to those, then. Under 1905, supplementary regulations, when we had our hearings recently and over the last couple of years for a couple of gas stations, we've had a lot of residential output or input on how close some of these gas stations have been proposed. And, there's a lot of great research out there that says you should have separation. We do have some language in the conditional use chapter for standalone gas stations with a separation, but it doesn't apply if it's not a conditional use or if it's a part of a convenience store. And so we wanted to broaden this, make it apply to all of them, that there has to be a separation from residential to the storage tanks. And it's not just for the fueling pumps, but it's for the pumps, the tanks, any type of fuel, and trying to be as broad as possible. 1905 applies to everything, whereas the conditional use section only applies to CUPs.
Okay, should we add the separation from parks, schools, places of assembly?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can just move that.
And something else. Well, I think.
Now this one, the next one is just as a result of some recent legislation. Right now, for our temporary uses, you've seen this a couple times over the years as we have the food truck language. This year, there were some legislative bills that passed related to business licenses and related to mobile food vendors, food trucks in particular. And so some of those, and that law went into effect immediately. So there are some portions of our code we haven't been able to enforce because it conflicts with the new state law. And that's this section right here, where we can't require approval from nearby businesses for the operation of a food truck. We can only require approval from the landowner. So if there's one landowner and then on top of that land is a lessee that is a food business, like a restaurant or a fast food place or whatever, that business can't, whereas we were requiring that in the past.
It's a state law?
That's a new state law, yep, that just passed. So we can still require property owner approval, but not the business if they're not the same.
Are we going to be able to get a business license?
Business license is also a little tricky. Some of these, we will not be getting a business license. They have the way that law was written, if they have a business license and a health inspection from any city or county in the state, then that license has to be respected within our city.
How do they, then, if they don't have to have that, how do they know what?
Taxes to pay? That's a very excellent question.
Taxes to pay, what our requirements are?
They're not exempt from our land use regulations, from zoning, so we can still require the temporary.
Did you?
So if they show up without a temporary use permit, then we can.
Okay.
Kimber, can we go back to the other one? Say that I'm a brick and mortar restaurant.
Yep.
And I have some predatory person that comes and parks in my parking lot and they're competing with me. The city can only require the permission for the landowner, but not the lessee.
Correct.
Lessee has no recourse. They can't go to the landowner and get the landowner to say, get out.
It starts to get a little fuzzy there because one of the specific things in this law was that we can't require nearby restaurants to give approval. And you can't have a separation from existing restaurants.
But
So
isn't there
they
something
had
that,
very good lobbyists.
isn't there something though that they cannot take up required parking or disabled parking?
There are some protections, yes, but not a whole lot.
Couldn't take your parking, your required parking.
What benefit do I have to be a brick and mortar and pay taxes then?
Yeah, there were some heated debates up at the Hill this year.
Did you also say if they get a permit from any county health department in the state, they can operate in any other county?
Yes, it's reciprocity that was approved through that. So, not in any other state, sorry, county within our state, but yes.
Somebody friends with a food truck company.
There was a lot of
It was a
TV
big
coverage on
one.
this.
Yeah, this was a big one, so. So then, oh, go ahead.
So, largely what I do is food safety, and we deal with this issue, and it's
Going with this, yep.
a national issue. It's not a Utah thing. This is all across the country. Food trucks and even baking goods at home and selling them in the public.
Well, that cottage food one was
Cottage
a big one
food
as well.
is huge.
Yeah.
Wasn't,
Edible marijuana is huge, so food safety is expanding. This is an interesting issue, though.
Was there also a requirement where a food truck also has to have a brick and mortar kitchen somewhere?
Not necessarily, I don't think. Oh, the food carts, yes, sorry.
Oh, it's food
The
carts.
food carts, yes.
Okay, then you have to have a brick and mortar kitchen in order to operate it.
Something like that, yeah. We don't see a whole lot of
But it
just
wasn't-
those guys. So.
Okay.
The other issue is we can't require background checks on food trucks. They separated out ice cream trucks, so ice cream trucks, we can still require background checks, but that means that we may, right now, our code prohibits food trucks in residential zones, but we kind of have allowed it as part of like private catering for events, but we may not be able to do that anymore because one of the concerns we had going through this process before was making sure that anyone operating in a residential area and selling to kids had a background check. By that anymore.
So what if a food truck sells ice cream?
And it's an ice cream truck.
Along with the Korean rice bowl?
Percentage, yeah, if it's their primary item, yeah, no, that's a good point.
Could we do something like with the background check? It's not required, but in specific zones, you could say, look, if you want to sell in residential, you would have to provide it or something like that. I mean, would there be a way to where we could make that zone specific, to where we're not outlying it?
No, because then we would technically be requiring it for them to operate in parts of the city. Legal's looking into it, and we thought we were going to have to overhaul our code a lot more, so this is kind of better than we expected, looking at the language as it was going through the process, and we all weighed in quite a bit, but lobbyists.
What about we don't have this as in this cleanup, but what about the home baking and canning and honey and all of that?
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of other amendments to business licenses, and so we think our home occupation is okay because we recently loosened it up so that if they weren't having a lot of clients coming, if they weren't having a lot of deliveries, then they didn't require a home occupation, and so we're fine with that. But the county does require, if they're going to be selling food, they have the whole cottage home industry inspections for kitchens, technically.
Okay.
Okay. Yay, legislative session. Don't you wish, like some states, we did it every 2 years instead of one? All right, so then the next one is landscaping and fencing, and I know this will probably bring up some conversation, but we're recommending that we remove the requirement for weed barriers. The issues that we've been having, especially in public parks, our city standard has been amended, so we're not putting them in parks. It ends up becoming more of a maintenance issue down the road because they start flopping up, they get torn, and then it takes a lot more work to pull everything up, lay it back down, and they're not as efficient and effective at preventing weeds. And we're hearing the same, now that the city's not requiring it, well, we've been hearing it all along, but now we listen to it a little more. But we've been hearing from developers of commercial projects that it's also a burden for them to have to go back and reinstall everything down the road. So,
Just put pre-emergent in there.
That's what I was going to ask.
yeah, we can say that. That's fine.
At least that gets a couple of years where they...
Okay, I will. All right. So then, parking, you'll recall we had a shared parking application that 2 different paragraphs on shared parking, so we're going to put all those together. We've had some site plans where we have a prohibition of putting power lines or putting trees under power lines, but then requiring trees every 30 feet. So making sure those are consistent. Subdivisions, clarifying remnant parcels. It's a little fuzzy. Oh, go ahead. Go back. Yeah.
Oh, shoot, I don't have, okay. Sorry, I have to get to the page. Says that for shared parking, you have to have an agreement. An agreement with whom?
With the other property owners. So if you're going to share parking, you have to have an agreement that you can share that parking.
Between the shared.
Between the sharers, yeah. We have our new city attorney.
Esquire.
Another Duck fan.
All right. So
He does not get a microphone, right?
he does not get a microphone, no.
Okay.
He doesn't need
He doesn't need one. So the subdivision requirements, we just want to make sure it's clear that people can't just subdivide and leave off a little sensitive piece or an unlandscaped piece that's not developable. So that we do allow subdivisions leaving remnants. So for example, SLR property, right? Let's say you have 1,000 acres. Okay, you can break off a piece because the remainder is developable. Start to get too small, we need to have something showing that it's developable. We did this with Western Hills, where they had that little piece that said future development, and we looked at it and went, is that feasible? And they had to actually provide a plan showing that it's feasible.
One that came to mind was on Ring Road, the last church that was done up there. They had a little sliver.
Yes,
that was
remember
left
that.
off.
Yep.
That doesn't look like it's developable.
Developable, yeah. So we would want to make sure that we can tell that it's developable. You know, does it meet the minimum lot size for the zone? Does it have access frontage? Things like that. Now, group mailboxes. Do any of you drive on Talus Boulevard or in that area? Okay. Well, this brought up that we didn't have any standards. We've let the developers and the Postal Service kind of identify where those mailboxes are going to be. Well, in this case, we ended up with a group mailbox on a collector street without parking, and you see cars parked in the center turn lane and people jumping across the street to go get their mail. So because we didn't approve that location, we're making them relocate the mailbox. But we wanted to have a little bit more teeth in there to say, look, you can't put those on a collector street unless you're going to provide a bulb out for safety. There you go.
Question about that one.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Our neighborhood, which is non-HOA, says in there we're only supposed to put temporary mailboxes in until such time as that the neighborhood is completed, and then they're going to put it. Seen any plan? And everybody's got them in buckets. So.
That's a good question.
That isn't that isn't part of our.
No, it's not. It's a little sliver on Colt. Another couple streets there, but.
Chat
But
with
it's
me
unresolved.
after,
It's
or send me
unresolved.
something, because we'll want to follow up with the post office.
Okay.
Okay, so, next one, conditional uses. So conditional use permits, right now, every conditional use permit goes to the city council. However, we have some site plan processes and amendments that are actually staff or planning commission. And so recently we had, for example, Quick Quack was a site plan staff approval, planning commission conditional use permit approval, and council, and that was because of their agreement. But what we want to do is make the conditional use permit track with whatever the land use process is. So, and then also removing the pickup and drop-off requirements for preschools and daycares because of state law. And then a couple other things here. I think this is actually, oh yes, that's it. Okay, see, it's not that bad. 1916, site and architectural standards. We would like to broaden the customarily conducted outside, because let's be honest, that was a little silly to take that all the way to council for the council to say, yes, you can have a car wash vacuum outside, and add some similar uses so that whoever the land use authority is can just do that. One of the things that dropped out of the code was the 5-foot buffer between buildings and parking and drive areas, so we're putting that. And then we would like to limit, back up and said we weren't going to regulate color. However, We've had a few really scary applications come in for commercial developments. Not naming any names, but one was bright yellow with lots of orange. And then let's just say there was a very large big box in our city that wanted to orange. Managed to avert all of those. So what we just want to say is that yes, you can have bright colors if you're a commercial building, but as an accent, not. So I'm sure we'll have some lively discussion in here.
Well, if it's just an accent, I could understand, but if it's a national logo, can we really tell them not to change the
Yeah.
color?
Yeah, we can tell them. We've
There's
done
a
that.
big difference
That's it.
between the word please and shall.
Yes.
What does that mean?
This is saying, not please, this is limiting it to accents for non-residential buildings. You can still end up with the cool yellow houses and whatnot, let people have architectural freedom, but the Planning Commission and the council both had strong reactions to a certain recent application, and let's just say if you had seen the plan, long-term box store.
So a recent applicant, as you mentioned, came in, and there were some reactions on some accent coloring that was predominant. I just so happened to see one of those by a certain big box store in Orem today, and it was validation of the Planning Commission's ideas that it was, you could see it from outer space.
Exactly.
It was as bright of a color as you can imagine, but the interesting thing was there was also some discussion about some parking things in front of stalls, and those weren't so obvious.
Yeah, exactly.
Blended in. But those colors, you could see them from a long way away.
But again,
Yes, you could.
But if it's a national logo, brand, I don't see how we
We've
could
done it, though. There are places
Standards.
where, back when Apple had its red logo, for example, there were places that prohibited primary colors, and so Apple had to do some different color. So you can do it. I'm not saying we necessarily should, but so let's think of the AutoZone, for example, right? AutoZone has their national branding. We're able to convince them not to do the whole front of the store of that color and just do accent. And so that gives them the freedom to use their logo colors, but not as.
But in this specific case, I think the sentiment was, logo was okay.
Yeah.
It's just you're not going to take that primary accent color and blazon it all across your building.
On the building,
No,
exactly.
there's places in Washington DC and Virginia, if you go through, it's just trees and then colonial buildings. And if you look closely, you can probably tell that that's a Starbucks. But they're all like that. They just look like colonial buildings first and then businesses later.
And you don't have to go, you don't have to go that far, but those are good examples of saying, yes, we can. And we want to let people have freedom, but let's just keep it.
I'll tell you, I was just, nearly put a skylight in the car when I saw the AutoZone in Lehigh. It is very attractive. It is what we would have liked to have gotten in. So they will do it. The national brands will do.
They'll do it if they want to be there.
That's right. And if the money and the clientele is there, they will do it.
Yeah, no, I know those change the buildings, like Park City has, national chains that look like the character of Park City, but the logo itself, it's like telling McDonald's, you can't have a yellow
calling a logo.
arch.
No.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's.
the logo.
Dictate
Yeah, I don't see how you
content.
could tell McDonald's not to have a yellow arch.
We don't
you know.
dictate content of the sign, right?
No. So we're not saying the sign.
Well, we're talking
just
color.
talking about the building architecture.
Oh, okay, all right, sorry, I misunderstood.
Building architecture, yes.
Okay.
And if we wanted to go farther, we can. I think, we have a pretty good requirement now where we have more clear standards for how many materials and breaking up the facade and vertical and horizontal. So I think just clarifying that these bright colors can be limited to accents on the architecture will. We're lucky that the one in question was within a plan where they had regulations for compatibility, so we were, sorry, you can't do that. And it's funny because the property owner, the master developer, was, hoping that we would be the bad guys on that because they didn't want to tell him no. And so it ended up working out. Okay, so that was that on the architectural standards, and then lighting. Oh, right, okay, so we're just making some cross-references between 1911, which is our lighting chapter, and 1918, which is design standards, so people back and forth for this. We wanted to combine and clarify the illuminated signage facing residential. We have sections, and it wasn't clear what facing meant, so we took some other language in our code elsewhere where if you have a 15-degree lighting standards for reflectivity and brightness and whatnot, and said, okay, you can okay, these next two digital signs, bit of an issue, but what we're looking to do here, if we don't do it now and take it proactively, we have an application coming in, property owner, for this type of, so,
Baseball field?
no, yes, that's coming later.
Okay.
But what this is for is, so we don't allow digital changeable copy in the city at all, exception of schools. So yeah, everything can just be. But do have some instances where things that we didn't necessarily think were signs at the time actually are digital signs were approved. So think about every time you go to 4 out of the 5 or 6 banks drive-throughs and you look at the top and there's like a little sign, stop and go, open, close. Some of those were actually approved by the city inadvertently, and they're digital signs. You don't necessarily want to go back and say 10 years later, hey, you have to take. But what we want to do is possibly allow for that type of digital signage, but have the regulations on it so that it's very clear that it doesn't open the door to. But limit it to the regional commercial and community commercial zones, limit monument signs, only a small does want to have digital. That, but you can't have white background so that it's not blinding. Small percentage, or it's on canopies. That appears to cover all the instances where without opening the door. So we just wanted to put this out here because that way we can kind of craft it the way we think is best rather than waiting for this out.
Thinking about what we talked about earlier with the sports complex.
Yes.
We have regulated certain signs by zones. And that would be, what, a institutional zone? And could we write code that would not make us bend the rules?
Definitely don't want to write code that is having us bend the rules. So what we've kind of said is, okay, if it's the scoreboard and it's only a certain percentage of the size, you know, you're going to have the big old board that says only digital copy up there is the score, then it's all under that percentage. It's not necessarily a content regulation. Problem is, if we want to start flashing the words Coke, sponsored by Coke, well, then it becomes a hope that then if we have a digital sign on a Walmart and they want to flash big sale, you know, and have going up it, we've opened the door to all types of digital signs. We just have to be careful how we do it.
Well, and that's going to limit the city a little bit because of
the funding, yeah.
Said it.
Yeah, so that's the question though. I mean, that's the difficulty that we find ourselves in. You know, sometimes we get to wear developer shoes and realize why they come to us and complain about some of our rules, right? But if we're holding them accountable, we should hold ourselves. So if we're going to have digital changeable copy, I know Mark's going to, because.
Can we disable his mic in advance?
You can, Mr. Chair, you can. I'm just kidding. Long story short, there are ways to do it where we can have the digital scores and not have to have a person up there changing a placard. But it's once we start having the advertising that's a big problem.
Sure, Mark.
Well, no, but I mean, like the same thing for the lighting. You know, just because we allow sports complex lighting doesn't mean that we then are opening the door for lighting for every possible use in the city. We can narrowly craft it so that it is specific to a public sports complex, you know, so there's different things that we can do. It can have certain times that it has to be turned off by. I mean, there's elements that can be built into it. Same thing with like the scoreboard conversation. And we debated this a lot internal, does a scoreboard, you know, how much does that look and feel like a billboard? Even if it is just the name of a field, does that trigger some of those similar kinds of things? And so again, we can craft language, but depending on how myopic we get in looking at that particular, you know, element, we're going to have to craft it and say, okay, a scoreboard is defined as X. Scoreboards are allowed in Y zones, and, you know, scoreboards may contain, you know, movable text that allows you to, you know, keep score for the event, you know. So it's a challenge, but I'll be honest, the last city I worked for, we had portable scoreboards that were fantastic because we could put them up for football games, and then, you know, just by one flick of a switch, it now can keep lacrosse scores, or it can be used for soccer, or, you know, different time periods for different things. And so, I mean, there's a lot of flexibility that comes with these things, but it's a fine line that we have to walk. And Kimber's right. We do need to make it so that it's not an unfair thing. However, one is an information component for a game, and it's up for the duration of the game, and then it's down and off. The other is a marketing purpose, which goes a completely different direction, so it's a tough one.
Along that line, should we be thinking about adding a zone for our parks, for our, no, we have institutional, but that
Have
could.
institutional, yeah. Talked about a park zone or an open zone. But we would need to have it separated out. Pocket Park can have it.
Right.
I would say we just zone it institutional.
But then that opens it up for the churches and hospitals.
Well, churches can already do it already.
But the hospital,
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. Never mind then.
that's the reason I was thinking if we had something that was not institutional.
Yeah,
So-
we'll figure it out.
Specific to a sports complex. And a
That
public
may-
sports complex, you know.
We have the public, we can do the public. Talked about a public facilities zone.
Yeah. So along that similar concept, you know, we've talked a lot about fencing and stuff. We've got a problem with someone who's been swimming in our pond over off of 800 West. They're jumping the fence and swimming, and we've run them off. So, you know, at some point, I think we're going to have to go back to that conversation where for security and safety and liability, I'm going to have to say we need an 8-foot chain link fence with razor wire on the top.
Now, that wasn't culinary water, right?
No, it's secondary. It's secondary
Okay,
water.
good.
It's ditch water, but, I mean, the problem is I can't, from a security standpoint, there's a certain level of security that I've got to be able to offer, and this wrought iron, 6-foot wrought iron is just not cutting it. And
Either
so.
will an 8-foot fence either, but with the razor wire, that might help.
So we're going to have to probably come back, and so these are the kinds of things, though, where people might look at us and go, you hypocrites, you're letting yourself have X. Well, we're talking safety, we're talking life safety. At some point, it's not about aesthetics, it's about something different. And so I'm not saying in all cases, but I'm saying that there's a bigger philosophical thing that we're struggling with as staff and as an organization, because how do we address the aesthetic needs, the being fair needs, but at the same time, I got to provide security.
Well, to that extent, we've had some other places come in. I'm thinking of the cell phone tower over there, and they have the same concerns for security and safety and liability issues. They wanted to have a 8-foot fence with razor wire and stuff like that, and we wouldn't let them do it. And so, to me, you know, I don't like the conversation of how can we craft this so and we can take advantage of it. You know, if we're going to say that we don't want digital signs in our city, we don't want to have a gas station have it, well, then we need to suffer through those same consequences and not allow ourselves to have a billboard, and not allow ourselves to have all these other things that we want to have as a city, because, you know, all of a sudden, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. And I know we say, well, it's always sometimes, and yada, 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 but at the same time, all the other businesses here in our city want to be able to take advantage of the same advantages and whatnot that we're trying to give ourselves with the scoreboard, want to take advantage of the same advantage we're giving ourselves with the fencing and stuff like that. And I do feel it is hypocritical of us as a city to say, you can do this, we can do this as a city, but no one else can do it because we've got a higher colony or whatever.
I completely agree. And we were just chuckling back here that we'd have a city-owned public zone. And then we heard some other mention of what was it, a utility area that's owned by the city that has its own special zoning, has its own special rules. I agree that we should live by the same thing.
It's also about the customer or the intended audience and their needs. And so if there was a private company that came in and put in a sports complex, I don't think the city would be saying, no, you can't have a scoreboard. And so the specific use of a sports complex, I think, relegates some of the needs of the audience of that sports complex.
Right. We're not arguing about the intended use or the end product. We're arguing about whether the code is right for every use.
Right, but if we're saying it's hypocritical to the city, it's only hypocritical if a private company comes in and builds a sports complex and the city says, no, you can't have a scoreboard, but we have one. Because we're measuring apples and oranges. Apples.
Well, we did that with the cell phone tower.
Well, but to a certain extent, if I want to have a scoreboard that advertises Coke so that I can collect money for my sports complex, but I don't want to allow Maverick to have a digital signage advertising Coke so they can raise, so they can make money for their Maverick, in my mind, the intent there is the same. And we're hypocritical saying, well, we want to have the ability to make money off this sign, but we don't want to give Maverick the same capability. We want them to go out there and have the little guy sticking the thing up there to do that advertising.
So the concern isn't about the scoreboard at all. The concern is about advertising on the scoreboard. Very different.
Well, it's about digital signage at all in the city, and this is something that we talked about in depth, and I think a lot of people know my stance on this, but it tends to be that the fear that if we allow anything, next thing we'll have is Lehigh eyesore over there, and I'm saying I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think we can allow freedom. We can allow people to have modern conveniences, including grocery stores and stuff like that, without allowing something that's 5 billion candle watt power and they can see from the moon.
Do we want to look like State Street from Salt Lake City all the way down to Provo? Drive down it and take a look. We don't want that. And that's the reason that I think a lot of us have kind of said, we really want to limit those lit signs, anything that's changeable. And
well, I understand that, but if we're saying then that's our goal, then we need to live by it and say, well, we're just going to have to deal without some funding for the complex, or figure out another way to, maybe put a static sign up there or something like that.
I just find it a hard tie that Walgreens is going to come and say, because you have a scoreboard at your baseball field, I thereby want this. And maybe that's...
You never know. Do you have a lawyer?
like your comment about the portable signs that can be used for cost.
Well, hopefully we've given you some good feedback, Kimber, on that one.
Yes,
Hopefully you've
I
taken
feel
some
good.
notes
So
and-
we, like I said, this is one of those things I want to have wrapped up. The council agenda on the 20th is going to be a painful meeting, so if you want to come give the moral support, that would be great. We're going to have most of the annexation rezones on that agenda, and this code packet, as well as the general plan. So it'll be fun. So this is scheduled for a public hearing with you on June 8th. And so hopefully we can work through any issues. Please send me any text feedback that you have in the meantime.
I have some feedback on some, I wanted to hear what you had to say before I
Great.
interrupted. But going back, way back to 190202, I have a little question about that one. And it's more consideration, just consider this and see what you think, and let me see if I can find it. Item XX 115. We're talking about private refueling stations.
Yes.
And we talked before, defined what a public refueling station was, and it says it's gasoline, diesel, natural gas, or electricity. It didn't say that on the private. I'm assuming,
Oh, yeah, I can just match the fuels. Yeah, it's supposed to include all.
I was assuming it did, and if it does, then my question becomes, what about a homeowner that wants to refuel their electric car or their natural gas car? I mean, I don't know if we want to have that or don't want to have that, but it's something we need to consider when we're writing
Be
this.
careful not to accidentally prohibit it. Thank you.
Well, but
Great
natural
comment.
gas, I think it requires high-pressure lines that I don't
Yeah.
think you would typically see in
But
neighborhoods.
electric.
But electric for sure.
Accidentally.
Natural gas, you can have individual homeowner. All you do is you have it's like air pressure.
Yeah. Can I urge a strong caution on that? I actually saw a house completely exploded in Argentina that was trying to fill their natural gas into their car and blew it up, and there were bricks all over the neighborhood. So that's.
There are regulations on it, and, the federal government definitely gets involved in that, but it's something we need to consider, because at some point in time, our city will have to address that.
Well, to go even further, in our ag zones, do they allow for gasoline storage to refuel tractors and whatnot? And I'm sure they are. We did it. I grew up on a farm. We had a big tank.
So anyway, I just wanted you to consider that. My other one is on 19.05. No, I'm sorry, 19.0606, I think it is. Let me see if that's it. You were talking earlier, yeah. Here we go, 190606, item 3. You talked earlier about how you have to define things. You talked about I think it was, what was it? You said within 30% of, was that lighting or?
Oh, that was signage lighting, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
different section.
No, but what I'm saying is that sometimes you have to define things to make sure we understand them. And in this item, it says, "No trees shall be planted directly under or in close proximity." What is close proximity? I realize that most of the people in this city don't have to worry about this. I happen to have a telephone pole in my front yard. Where can I plant a tree? What is close proximity? I don't know. It doesn't define it.
Isn't there someplace that said 11 feet?
Well, on the other hand, the city says I have to have so many trees in my front yard. Well, what's close proximity to that telephone pole that's also in my front yard?
And the tree can grow closer and closer.
Wasn't there?
And then it'll get trimmed and it'll look like it had a flat top.
Or then the power company comes through like they did in our neighborhood and cuts a bunch of trees down.
Wasn't there an item in the packet where there was power lines and the property owner said the city could plant trees under them as long as they weren't taller than 12 feet?
Oh, that's what you're thinking of?
Yeah,
Yeah, there was at some point, yeah.
That was in this
But-
packet.
That was in this packet?
Yeah, I
Oh.
thought it was this packet.
Maturity has to be.
Right.
Yeah.
But you have, what that said is it said you had to get permission from the city,
It had to be,
have to get written permission from a utility. You're never going to get a written permission from a utility to put a tree anywhere near.
and the
their
tree,
power
the tree
lines.
had to be under 12 feet.
And then the tree had to be under 12 feet when it matures.
You recall the corner of Grandview Boulevard and Redwood Road. We had the residents, and I don't know if it came here, but we had the residents really pushing hard for us to provide screening for all of the booster pump infrastructure and the power boxes and the communication stuff that's right on that corner. And so we had the same challenge of how do we put shrubs and bushes and trees in such a way that it will help to screen some of those utility infrastructure things. We had to be far enough away from things. We couldn't be under the power poles. And so we've actually had to fight this same battle of how do we do this? But this is residents that are asking us to screen what is, somewhat obtrusive utility located on that corner.
Well, if it were easy, everybody in the city would be up here.
Okay, we'll work on that one. Any other comments before?
It's just, I don't want to send it to you, so.
Oh, okay, perfect. I'll write it down.
19.04.07, 3C. Says setbacks will be measured from the building, the edge of the adjacent, so there's a
Oh, okay, hold on.
19.3C. A typo. And I have two more.
Building, 2.
Yeah, someone, I think it was, actually I do have, someone addressed, we should include schools and parks with the 500 feet from the.
Yeah, I
Oh, okay.
got that
You
one.
got that? Okay, all right. And then, let's see, 19.16.04.
Which subsection?
It's number 2A. Vegetation nurseries is repeated.
Oh, yep, okay, thanks.
One more. Okay, and then the last one is, near the end of the thing, it's right in illumination. Oh, it's 1918.06. It's on the next page, 3E, the very bottom of the page. It says, as measured a horizontal distance.
Yes. Oh, as measured, so horizontally from,
Okay. But is that grammatically correct, though? Measured to as or to a horizontal distance?
I guess I can just say as measured from a horizontal.
Okay, yes. Then I'm happy, and that's it.
Any other comments?
Yes, one. Trees. Bring that up.
Oh, yes, one thing, what we're going to do is we're going to put in some discouraged trees. They come up over and over, it's that they're being put in park strips. We're just going to discourage those. And that way, if a homeowner puts it up, we're not going to have to go make them rip it out, but when we're reviewing site plans, we can say,
Okay, what?
hackberries and honey locust. Well, aspens are just, they're all one tree, so it's Okay, so if you're good with that, thank you.
All right, item number 11. We're going to look at item number 11.
Thank you,
Approval
everyone, that
of
was great.
minutes. Item number 11, approval of minutes. Everybody had a chance to take a look at those minutes. Have any changes to? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the minutes of May 11th for the Saratoga Springs Planning Commission meeting.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item number 12, reports of action. Kimber. Any commission comments? None. Director's report.
All right, so for your next meeting right now, it looks light because we have the code, Peak Square Retail Concept Plan and Engineering Standards. But we are also going to have the continued item from tonight for the general plan, and then it looks like there might be a couple more applications popping up on there. For council, at their last meeting, they reviewed some changes to the concept plan for Heron Hills Park. They did say that vacuums are appropriately conducted outside. And they approved the Saratoga Springs Animal Hospital. I was out that night. Mark, do you know what they did on Fox Hollow? I haven't gotten that.
It
Continued.
continued.
Continued, okay, great. So that was continued again.
What was the end color of the Quick Quack?
The muted colors from
Hatch Highland.
Match Highland.
And no orange trash receptacles. I don't know if you heard that
It
one.
was emphatically stated that there should be no orange
Right.
trash receptacles.
And that whatever they put out had to be large enough to contain the
The
refuse,
high winds that blow trash all up and down the streets.
right? And had to have a cover on it.
So it was good. Next week, the council's having a very short meeting to talk about, they're actually not talking about any of these. They're having a 30-minute meeting to handle some administrative business, and they will also be looking at the McLaughlin updated concept plan to get ready for their meeting 20th, but then they don't have a meeting till June 20th. So if you guys are feeling bad, here's the council's rough agenda for that meeting. So,
We
yeah.
still feel bad.
You can send them flowers or something, that's great.
That's self-inflicted.
Exactly, so, no. Oh, no, sorry, the meeting was canceled because of Splash. And don't forget Splash. Splash is, you know, the 20th anniversary. It's going to be a big, big deal, so go to some events, have some fun. That's about it. I was happy you got to meet Nora. No more annexations? Actually, we might be getting one, we'll see. We're just letting them go and do their own thing. Yeah, so, but yeah, so that was great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Without objection, we'll adjourn.
I can't sit on those chairs for more than 30 minutes. Get a waffle print in your backside.
Oh, I do need to chat with you.
I like to hide behind here and do this. I duck back there and I'll make signals to the mayor like that. Or wrap it up, or It is.